I've made a tier list of every single XFactor ability found in NHL 25's World of Chell mode. My criteria for this tier list comes down to 3 things. The first one is versatility, not only with build versatility, but also with ice versatility, meaning with or without the puck, or versatile in all 3 zones, providing value. The next one is impact, meaning how noticeable it is that the ability when you equip it is doing something for your player instantaneously. Something like skating faster or shooting harder, something that you can notice right away with your eyes that something is actually performing more with versus without the ability. And the third one is game-changing factor. This is something like using the ability will create a key goal or have a big defensive play that you would be able to accomplish with the ability, but you might not be able to accomplish it without the ability. Within the tier list, I grouped a lot of these into subcategories within the specific tiers. That's because a lot of abilities within the game share similar scenarios or playstyles that the ability caters to, just with a little bit of different flavor. Something like shooting abilities found within a D tier will be grouped up together and talked about very grouped up because they all do very similar things, just with a little bit of different pros and cons. With that being said, let's get started. Starting with the D tier, I'm calling this subcategory the energy tier. All of these abilities have something to do with either injury prevention or helping maintain or increase the rate of stamina you gain. The problem is that energy in World of Chell specifically goes up pretty quickly, which means that it doesn't feel very good to actually use an ability slot on something such as energy or preventing an injury. They don't have a lot of impact. Born Leader probably has the most impact or potential impact, as scoring a key goal increases your energy, but honestly, if you're red or perhaps no energy, there's a good chance you're not going to be scoring a lot of goals, which makes Born Leader a bit awkward to utilize. This category is called the big tier. All of these abilities are probably used best with big builds. They're all physical, but they're also really utilizing a player's size to their advantage. The problem is that in NHL 25, physical play and checking in general is not very good. This means something like Back At Ya is really not getting any sort of value because no one's throwing a lot of hits, especially compared to previous games. With hitting so poor, people are scared to commit to a hit and it just doesn't work, which makes Back At Ya not very good. A lot of these also have some awkward things where you aren't necessarily pushing any buttons. Total Eclipse and say Crease Crasher don't necessarily help you in terms of making you do anything with your emotions on your controller, just kind of hoping that something happens physics-wise or animation-wise that makes things a little bit better. A lot of them are very niche areas on the ice, with Bouncer being strictly in front of your own net. Total Eclipse when you're just standing in front of the net screening the goalie. Big Rig, you have to be doing that protect puck motion, which is worse with it actually being on the right stick versus only pushing the A button and driving. They're all very niche, but also don't provide enough impact to your player's playstyle. And the final ones here in the D tier, all of these are all pretty specific in the way that they actually accomplish things, but their impact just isn't very good. For instance, something like Relentless and Skilled Up are all very weird niche things that provide impact, but in the grand scheme of thing of a whole game, you're not going to be using them very frequently. Maybe if you have it on your build, you're going to be using it more frequently, but they just aren't impactful enough to actually do anything. Something like It's Tricky and Spinorama just don't provide enough impact in the game. Shock and Awe sounds cool, but it just doesn't have enough value and you just don't notice it as much. I'd much rather use a really good shooting ability, or there's better puck control or deking abilities that are just better than Shock and Awe. Maybe All Alone is good in something like threes where you're going to get more breakaways, but it's very niche, and honestly, there's just better ones that could help you score goals on breakaways other than All Alone that are just more versatile. The C tier starts to have abilities that provide good value in certain situations, but they are pretty niche and are probably overshadowed by some of the other ones. For instance, this defense subcategory here features Yoink, Quick Pick, and In Reverse. Now, stick lifts and interceptions in general are very good in NHL 25. They're honestly better in NHL 25 compared to say last year or even a couple years ago. The problem with these two is because they're so good, it feels a little bit of a waste in terms of an ability slot to utilize one of these abilities. I'm not saying it's bad to run them, but when stick lifts and interceptions are already good, it feels a little bit of lesser value at actually utilizing it as an ability slot when you can go and use one of your ability slots for something to increase its strength, or perhaps something that is a weakness on your playstyle that can be augmented by an ability. While in reverse is versatile in the sense it works on backwards skating, it isn't very versatile as you're really only utilizing it with a defensive build, but your impact on the game and your game-changing ability within reverse is pretty negligible as you're really only skating backwards faster. So while it gets value there, it doesn't have a whole lot of value beside that. The passing subcategory only has 2 in Third Eye and Send It. While it's great to have passing abilities and improving your passing is great, Third Eye is a little bit niche as it's only awkward passes that are outside of your vision, so these are things like behind the back passes are going to get a bit of a boost, while Send It is a lot more of long range passes to help you get that auto sauce. They're very niche scenarios, and honestly, if you're utilizing it to get the most out of these niche scenarios, it's going to be a bit awkward, as these scenarios are already pretty risky as is, and honestly just aren't versatile enough from an all-game perspective, instead of those one little niche scenarios that aren't really that great in the game of hockey in general. And finally, the rest of the C tier here, Beauty Backhand can be good. It is a good alternative to something like All Alone, as if you're shooting on the backhand on breakaways, this is probably a better option as it's more versatile if you're actually taking backhands in front of the net trying to score in other scenarios. Ankle Breaker is a better alternative to its Tricky and Spinorama, but it still doesn't provide enough value across the board, and it's hard to notice the value from an impact standpoint. Off the Rush used to be a D tier trait for me, but honestly, it's got a little bit of value because one-timers are so meta, and Off the Rush can improve one-timers when you're skating forward, which is pretty good, but not enough to justify it in a higher tier. And Seeing Eye is a very niche scenario. It can work pretty decently on defensemen, and I guess a forward if you're shooting from long range, but once again, you're really starting to cater towards animations and physics rather than pure numbers, pure animation that you can create with your controller with Seeing Eye. And I think it's better to have a shooting ability that helps your player just shoot harder or just shoot more accurately versus something like impacting the goalie's vision, which is probably just a roll of the dice if it works or not. The B tier has only 2 subcategories, with one of them having a name being the shooting subcategory. This features 4 traits in Snipe, Thunderclap, Heatseeker, and Make It Snappy. Now, Thunderclap and Heatseeker are basically the same thing. They help your slapshot and wrist shot power and accuracy from a distance, respectively. Now, Thunderclap probably is pretty good for, say, a defenseman, and Heatseeker is probably more catered towards a forward build. Heatseeker used to be very strong, say, a couple of years ago, but they just doesn't seem as impactful in the past kind of, say, 25 or even 24. Snipes are better in NHL 25, but the weakness of Heatseeker and Thunderclap is you can only use them from a distance. This makes them not super versatile from a shooting standpoint, as you have to be above the top of the circle to get any sort of value out of them. So while they are impactful in that you do notice your power and accuracy getting better, the versatility of these traits make them a little bit easy to defend. You know that if they are running Thunderclap or Heatseeker, chances are you're going to find them at the top of the circle looking to get the most out of their ability. Snipe is a bit more of a middle ground of these 2 abilities though, as it's something that's more catered to corralling pucks and then shooting afterwards. It's a bit more versatile in the ability that you can actually utilize it, as you don't need to be at the top of the circle to actually get the most out of it, but the impact of Snipe doesn't feel as noticeable as something like Thunderclap or Heatseeker. So if you're looking for something that helps in other ways, such as corralling loose pucks or helping actually pick up passes from your players and then shooting the puck afterwards, Snipe is a much better option. Make It Snappy is a bit awkward though, as I always thought that Make It Snappy wasn't very good, as realistically snapshots compared to wrist shots feel a little bit more basic. They feel like it's more of a control scheme that newer players are going to use, as they don't know how to take proper wrist shots with good power and accuracy. However, Make It Snappy can have value if it's in a scenario where you just don't have enough time to take a full-blown wrist shot that you can only push up on your right stick. Make It Snappy is a great option. If you're in tight or you don't have a lot of time, a snapshot is appropriate there, which gives value to Make It Snappy. It's a very niche scenario, and unfortunately it doesn't get a whole lot of value on this tier list because there's a trait that just does this scenario better, but Make It Snappy can have value within the right playstyle. The last two in the B tier are very different from each other, Big Tipper and Magnetic. Now Big Tipper is not very versatile at all. You only get value from it standing in front of the goalie, and you're probably only running it with a forward, more specifically probably a center. But where Big Tipper lacks in versatility, it makes up for it in terms of impact but also game-changing ability. Now tips in general are a little bit of a grown type of scenario, as realistically it's tough to defend a deflection because there's not really a button that you can push to defend someone standing in front of the net. Not to mention that people that are deflecting the puck don't push any buttons to actually deflect it. You simply stand in front of the net and hope that the game gives you a deflection animation. This makes it very awkward not only offensively but defensively. However, Big Tipper, when done correctly, is very powerful. On the flip side, Magnetic is extremely versatile, being used not only great offensively, but also defensively, as it helps you pick up passes or lose pucks, but also helps you corral, say, interceptions defensively, or just lose pucks defensively. The problem is that Magnetic doesn't have a lot of impact beyond that. You don't notice it, such as with Thunderclap or Heatseeker, you don't feel your shots getting more powerful or more accurate, because you're just picking up pucks. And potentially, it's hard to tell if Magnetic is helping you pick up a certain puck, or if you didn't have Magnetic, you possibly would already pick up that loose puck without it, which makes it a bit awkward to judge based on its impact. Both of these traits are powerful in their own specific playstyle, but they are very polar opposites of each other. You have a very versatile trait, but not a lot of impact in Magnetic, but also a very not versatile trait, but can be impactful in the right scenario with Big Tipper. It all depends on what you're looking for. Starting in the A tier, this is the physical tier. This is No Contest, Truculence, and Unstoppable Force. Now, Truculence and Unstoppable Force are in very similar categories, kind of similar to Big Tipper and Magnetic actually. Truculence is all about assisting in actually hitting players. Now the problem with NHL 25 currently gameplay-wise is that hitting and physical play in general is pretty poor. But if Truculence is actually assisting you to make those hits a lot easier and just more effective, this makes it a fantastic trait. The downside to Truculence is that because hitting is so weak, it feels a little bit of lesser value compared to other abilities. Why waste one of your 3 ability slots on Truculence when you already know hitting sucks? You could improve, say, your poke checking, or your shooting, or your passing. Things that you can control and are honestly okay in terms of the gameplay. They can make an impact on the game. It's a bit of a push-pull scenario with Truculence, because Truculence can improve your hitting, which in the game, it's already weak. So that technically means that you're improving something that is weak within the game, which sounds like a great idea. But on the other side, if it's already weak in the game, I'd much rather cater to something that I can control gameplay-wise, such as shooting or passing, or things that can actually help my gameplay that I know are going to be impactful versus hitting, which I know kind of sucks. Unstoppable Force is the opposite of this, where it's keeping the puck on your stick and soaking in hits and keeping control and balance of your player. It's the opposite of Truculence, which is helping you hit. Unstoppable Force is helping you take hits. It's basically the same idea as Truculence, just a little bit more offensive orientated. You're keeping control of the puck from hits, but a little bit of extra boost to keeping control of that puck and keeping your balance never hurts, and it does sound great in terms of on-paper value. Now, No Contest, on the other hand, is a lot more versatile, as it's all about going in for loose pucks and picking them up. While it is still pretty physical play, as it's a lot more of battling for loose pucks, No Contest is a lot more versatile, but it honestly doesn't have as much impact as something like Truculence. With the hitting assist that Truculence brings to the table, it's a little bit more noticeable. But No Contest is very similar to something like Magnetic, where you might actually see the impact sometimes, but it's also hard to judge if you are getting a lot of value out of the No Contest ability when you might just get that pickup from that type of scenario without it. It's hard to judge the impact that No Contest brings to the table. However, on paper, No Contest is a fantastic ability. It's very versatile, but also can be very strong in terms of not only offensive forechecking, but also defensively just picking up loose pucks, especially in and around the net. The defensive subcategory contains stick 'em up and shutdown. Now, stick 'em up is all about poke checks, where it improves your poke accuracy, but also just the ability to knock the puck off of an opponent's stick. This is fantastic and provides great value. I find poke checking pretty okay, but rather inconsistent, so stick 'em up is a great way to increase your consistency, not only as a forward on the forecheck, but also a defenseman in your defensive zone, or just trying to knock the puck off of an opponent coming into your zone. This one is arguably the most versatile defensive ability, as it can be used across the board. Poke checking is also the most common way to knock the puck off of a stick, and it's something that deserves a little bit more consistency in my opinion. Nothing can be more frustrating than making a good poke check, but it just doesn't feel like it does anything. Stick 'em up can help this, as it not only improves your accuracy, but also just improves your ability to knock the puck off, which is a fantastic tool to have for your player. Shutdown is very strong, but is a little bit less versatile. In my opinion, it's only really good for defenseman builds, as it's really only about one-on-one scenarios. However, in those one-on-one scenarios, it's very strong. It's a fantastic option for pretty much any defensive build, as it's all about one-on-ones, but also about poke checking, it's about hitting assistance, it's really, really strong defensively. Its biggest downside is that it's only defensive and defenseman build specifically, as a forward that is not really defensive thinking is just not going to be using it. And the final two here are puck on a string and tape to tape. Puck on a string is simply making the stick handling ability of your player better, but also is really strong at improving something like toe drags. I didn't think this was that crazy. It is quite versatile, but I didn't think it had that much impact until I saw how good toe drags are with puck on a string. They are lightning fast, and it's really crazy and very noticeable. Puck on a string is simply just a very versatile trait though, and can provide impact across the board. Not only could any forward run it, but also defensemen could potentially run it. In terms of breaking the puck out, having puck on a string and better stick handling is pretty good to have. Tape to tape is the much better option of the passing abilities, because it's not only a lot more versatile in when you can use it, as just making passes tape to tape, which is how the name implies, but it's also a little bit more impactful across the board and when you can utilize it. Third Eye and Send It have very niche scenarios of when it actually works best, but tape to tape is not very niche at all. It's all of the other scenarios, which is the general majority of them. If you're in someone's vision or your vision can see a player, tape to tape is going to improve that passing ability, which sounds very simple, but very effective to run. It can be used on not only forward builds, but also defensive builds, which makes it not only impactful, but versatile as well. Finally, there are two S tier abilities, being 1T and Close Quarters. 1T is really all the meta is surrounding. The timed one-timers are extremely powerful, and 1T does nothing but augment that ability. It is the most meta build currently, and it's also very versatile. It can be used on any forward build, but also defensemen can also run 1T, as DDD one-timers are very powerful. It's very versatile, but it's also extremely impactful, as pucks coming off of a timed one-timer are very fast and very accurate. 1T is very strong, and the meta surrounds it, which makes it a no-brainer to run in the S tier. The other one in the S tier is Close Quarters. Now, Close Quarters is not very versatile. It's only really usable below the hash marks in front of the net. However, in the versatility side, it's not very strong. Close Quarters is extremely effective in the other two categories. It's very noticeable in the power and accuracy boost you get from using Close Quarters, but it's also very game-changing. There's a lot of goals that will go in simply because you're running Close Quarters. It's teetering on the edge of broken and overpowered, as a lot of leagues have considered banning Close Quarters because of its game-changing ability. A lot of goals can just squeak in on goaltenders because you're running Close Quarters, which can be very frustrating for goaltenders, but also defensemen that are in correct position, but simply got close quarter cheese. That being said, it's a very powerful trait, and nearly any offensive player build can run Close Quarters and get value from it. This has been every single trait in ESHL ranked on this tier list. Some of them are a lot more versatile, while some of them have a little bit more value in other scenarios, but are a bit more niche and really cater to certain playstyles. Let me know what you're running, and let me know what you think deserves to be higher or lower here on the tier list. If you like this video and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. But until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.